Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
I can't thank you enough for joining me on this edition of Around with Randall. I want to start a 5-part series today on what I think of, or I'll entitle, the questions of relationship development. And we'll break each of the next 5 podcasts, including this one, into 5 different areas and really try to address what's holding us back as relationship builders when it comes to our responsibilities in being out there in the community and really looking for, as we've discussed on many different occasions, the idea of transformational relationship gift opportunities. And again, that's not defined by a dollar figure, but maximizing what someone's interest is in themselves and in the organization which you represent. Today, we'll talk about what I think of as pipeline development, finding prospects. Then we'll jump into the 4 major parts of the donor cycle. We'll start with obviously qualification, then into cultivation, solicitation, and we'll conclude with stewardship and funnel these around questions. What is it that we need to realize to be successful in each one of these areas? So today, part 1, pipeline questions. The question that I think that we tend not to ask the most often, but is the most important when we think about pipeline development, is actually quite simple, but yet profound. How likely are they to engage? The reason I think this question is first and probably most important is a couple of fold. Number one, we as the evolution of the internet and research has continued to develop, we have become fixed by and just obsessed with well screening. I'm here to say that well screening has a place. I think everyone within the legal and ethical requirements, not only of what maybe it's an industry like healthcare, HIPAA, or whether we're talking about FERPA and education, or we're talking about just ethical practices. I think well screening has a place and we should do it to the limits that we're allowed to. But at the end of the day, well screening tells us a lot about how much someone might give. And the question comes back to, if we remind ourselves of the question, how likely are they want to engage, about likelihood. And we spend so little time on that. We too often see a well screen and say, well, they can only give, according to outside data sources, $500. And so we dismiss them. And yet we know there are holes in the well screening. Part of the challenge and the pipeline questions, and this one being the most important, is the realization, hey, not all information is perfect. Not all information is correct either. And really the only way that we can know what someone might give is if we build the relationship. But yet we tend to look at well screening and fail to even posit the question in the processes we develop in building pipeline, whether or not they have a likelihood to give or the higher likelihood to give. The second part of it, as kind of a sub point, is, are they at the right level? Meaning what you work toward as your range. Maybe it's everything if you're in a smaller nonprofit. If you're in a larger nonprofit, maybe you're an annual giving officer or leadership annual giving officer or a major gift or planned gift or principal gift. You work in certain zones of opportunity. We tend to think, because well screening tells us, hey, they can only give $500, but yet we know the data is not perfect. Some do it much better than others. And I'm on the record, I'm a donor search, Bill Tedesco fan because of the amount of data that is actually accurate. But at the end, it's still not perfect. They're indicators. Somebody's at $500, well, I can't work with them. But yet they own a company and all their assets are in the company and the company is flush with cash and they're going to sell it. And yet, well, they screen at $500, I shouldn't work with them, instead of what we'll get to in a moment about more likelihood, actually having the conversation, finding some of those things out yourself. The other thing that we fail to too often not engage in is the realization that the most likely donors, the ones that will choose to engage with you, are the ones that have already given to you. They're Libun Sibuns last year, but not this year, or unfortunately not this year. Some year, but unfortunately not this year. The cost involved with getting a new donor is hugely different than retaining a donor. So even if you got a gift of $25,000 from Randall and you're there the next year and they said, we can't do that. We can only do 5,000. I don't understand why we would just then posit the thought process. Well, they're not up to my level. So all of these things, whether it's the overall thought process, how we're addicted to data, that gives us a little bit of inclination as to what might be possible. It doesn't talk about likelihood at all. Whether or not it's figuring out if they're at the right level based upon things that we sometimes can't know through screening, or retention versus new. We'll get to the retention on the back end as the last question as well. Really spending more time with our people that we already know, believe in what we're trying to accomplish. They've given gifts. How likely they are to engage is a question we should ask more often. And it should be the preeminent question that we ask when we think about pipeline development. If we spent more time figuring out who was likely to give and less time figuring out how much we think, air quotes, if you can't see me on the video, we think they can give, we actually might develop more relationships with people who can give higher dollars because it's important to them. At the end of the day, that's what likelihood's all about. Passion. What is important to them? So the first hurdle question that we deal with in this 5-part series and this subset in the pipeline or prospect research part is likelihood and the fact that we don't spend enough time thinking about it. The second question in this pipeline area is, do I trust the data management team? In some cases, data management is the CRM or an outside resource. I think of Omatic as an add-on to what Blackbaud and Razor's Edge does, or NXT. It depends on the size of the organization, the sophistication, the amount of people, the dollars, resources, things of that nature. But the question is, do you trust prospect management and research? I work with a number of places that have a prospect management research team or individual that they are totally and wholly responsible for identifying opportunity for the gift officers and shuttling data from out of the CRM into portfolios, which is technically in the CRM, into the gift officer's responsibility. And I got a lot of gift officers that don't trust them. Now, there are a lot of different reasons for this. I think most of it is around 2 factors: control and accuracy. One is the gift officer's issue. One is the database, infrastructure, prospect management team's issue. The first is control. I think in life, generally, we like to have control of what we're trying to accomplish. Some of us demand it more than others. I'm probably at the more of the demand it a lot in terms of control I have in my life. Thank God I married someone who is about a 5 million times better person than I am, who allows me that until she's had enough and then says, yeah, get back on the train. We're not doing that. She's always right. If that's true in life, that means it's also true for gift officers. We want control of the things that are possible, meaning our portfolio size and the people we hold on to, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. We'll also we want to make sure that we think we know what we know because we think we can control that. This is about faith. I played quarterback in high school. Not sure I was all that good. But even though we didn't throw the ball that often for running a wishbone offense, for which none of you probably know what that actually is, as a quarterback, when I would drop back as a right-hander, I learned that I had to have incredible faith in my left tackle. This is what the movie The Blind Side is all about Michael Orr. That faith comes from when I can't see what's going on behind me, but my responsibility is to do something, pass the ball limitedly, over here, but I can't see behind me. And I'd have faith that somebody was taking care of that blind side. The better your faith, the better your throws. You didn't worry about it. The same is true, to move this football metaphor into philanthropy and gift officers, in trusting your database management team, your prospect management team, your infrastructure team, whatever you tend to call them. Too often, there is an immediate distrust. Some of that is lack of control. Are we willing to have faith in the partners that are a part of our organization and trust that they're doing the best they can, not to get it perfect, never to be 100%, but to give you the best opportunity to be successful as a gift officer? It's not to say you shouldn't know or understand what they're trying to do or have a unique understanding of how that information gets to you and why it's important. Go back to the football. I knew how important faith was to that left tackle. For me, I needed faith in him. And what I learned was I knew exactly who he should block. As a quarterback, sometimes you have responsibility to kind of know what's going on all over the field. I knew what his responsibilities were. I understood that. I understood if they were in this kind of defense, that was going to change how we altered protection. It could mean, depending if the player was really good lined up over that left tackle, we might have to chip on him from a tight end or, in our case, a wishbone left halfback. All those things were known. But at the end of the day, my job wasn't to block. My job was to be the quarterback and on passing plays throw. Every once in a while, we completed a pass. The same is true here. That tackle would get beat. I'd get hit. They give you data. They don't turn into a donor. It turns out that the data is not perfect. And so some of this is a realization that perfection is not possible. But yet you have to have faith that the people who are doing it are doing their best. They're good at it. They're attempting to move the team forward. And that without them, you aren't going to be as successful. The second part of all of this is, are you using good data? And this is where faith also comes into place. Do you trust them? Because if they're using artificial intelligence, you have to understand and believe that they actually know it better than you do. I have 3 or 4 clients beginning to get into this, and there's this hesitancy with the gift officers, like, this is just bad data. And I'm like, that's not actually true. It's not that it's perfect data, but it's better data. It's actually with artificial intelligence, when we do it correctly, education, healthcare, and other places, focusing on the people who want, back to the first question, most likely to be engaging in the conversation. So the responsibility of prospect management is to show process, to show good data. But in the end, the gift officers are going to have to learn to trust much more so. And yes, trust comes over time. Yes, trust is earned. But a little faith along the front, when the ball is snapped and it's a new left tackle, I don't have a lot of time, or didn't years ago, decades ago, to figure out if they actually knew what they were talking about. I had to have faith that the system, the program, the coaches, practices, all the other things that were going on were going to take care of that person's learning curve. Do you trust the prospect management team? Question number 3. Am I willing to try new things to develop relationships? When we add things like clinician engagement for the first time, where it's not just a mailing program, it's active engagement with the physician. And we'll come to this in a moment in terms of these relationships, or referrals from a board, or it's a new way of looking, like AI, of getting you prospect names. And by the way, now new communication tools. We have less and less people picking up the phone. Are you willing to use texts? Are you willing to use LinkedIn? Are you willing to use Facebook? Are you willing to use different techniques, new things to start and have conversations? What I find is those that are hesitant to adjust, to evolve, end up being left behind. And that's not about fundraising, folks. I can't tell you how many examples in case studies out of the Harvard Business Review and other outstanding educational institutions, including my own master's work with an MBA, where you study people who chose not to adjust. My favorite story is Eastman Kodak. Where do you think Xerox came from in terms of copying? Eastman Kodak, they didn't want to adjust. Where did the idea of digital cameras come from? Did you know the first digital camera, what we think of in our iPhone, was developed at Eastman Kodak in Rochester, New York? Didn't want to do it, didn't adjust. There's all of these moments in our life where we have to choose, am I willing to take a chance? Am I willing to do something a little different? Not against ethics, not against morals, but a little bit different. Question 3 for us is, am I willing to try something new? New way to communicate, new way to build relationships, new way to engage. If you're not, eventually time will catch up to you. And so will the metrics that you don't want because you're not willing to think about it a little bit differently. Push through that envelope. And we'll get a lot more into this in terms of qualification questions next week. Number 4, do I have the right kind of relationships? And right kind is capitalized. And what I'm talking about are referral agents. Every data point I've ever seen in 27, 8 years of doing this says that the best way to enter into a new relationship is through a referral because it encapsulates trust and you get inside that cone of trust that a person has with a potential prospect and they're sharing that trust with you. But you have to have a relationship with that referral agent. Physicians are notoriously challenging to do this because they don't understand philanthropy. They don't know who you are. It's their patient. You're going to screw this up. Faculty members at universities, a little bit more likely because what they understand is that they had an impact on these lives either recently or it could be decades before. Then we get into boards and volunteers and campaigns. Got a client that maybe didn't quite do it the way I would have recommended, and now they're stuck. And it's because their volunteer board doesn't really want to make introductions, even though the relationship is good with the right kind of relationship with the, what I'll call the fundraising team, which means they have the right kind of relationship with the fundraising team, but they don't have the right relationship with themselves to feel comfortable in making those introductions. If you don't have the right referral agents, the right trust with them, what you end up with is a lot of names and not a lot of action. And this is why you got to spend time treating your referral agents like a major donor. Do you have the right kind of relationships with those that act as referral agents is really paralleling. Do you have really good relationships with donors? Because if you do, and with the right ones, metrics is never a problem. Pipeline's never a problem. So the fourth question in the great pipeline question conversation is, do you have the right kind of relationships with your referral agents? And number 5, are you willing to bless and release to find room for new prospects? I cannot tell you how many times, not every year, not every quarter, not every month, but every week I'm dealing with gift officers. When I start asking questions about pipeline, I hear numbers like 150, 200, 250, and they don't have room for new prospects. Pipeline. And I'm like, what are you doing? You cannot have that many people that are at the right level of giving for what you do and have a likelihood that they want to engage with you. What I find most often is they don't have the likelihood, but boy, they well screen really well. I come back to what I've said, and you can go back into other podcasts where I talk about this specifically. The ideal pipeline, or excuse me, the ideal portfolio size is not 125. It's somewhere between 45 and about 70. There's factors in that, but it's a smaller number. And you have to be willing to let go of people. You might let go of the ones that are highly well indicated, but aren't willing to engage. What good's having someone with a great deal of money that doesn't want to talk to you? Or they've made the largest gift they're ever going to make, so you're requalifying them. Recent podcast, blessing and releasing them. It's hard to do the last one, blessing and releasing, if you don't have the first 4, if you don't have a pipeline. So I'm not saying in and of itself it's easy, but we need to get better at letting people go. And I'm not going to break out in Idina Menzel and Disney's Let It Go. But I am telling you, you should think about it. You should be blessing and releasing multiple people per week. Per week. They're coming in, they're not qualified. I've made a gift, I'm holding on to them, but I don't know what to do with them. At a certain point, you got to bless and release and let them go. If you don't let and go, your portfolio gets too big, then it becomes paralysis by analysis. And then you're defeating the whole purpose of having some type of prospect management process, system, team support. If you can't let people go, so the new group of people that they are working through to figure out who to give you as a gift officer the best opportunity, a chance to be successful. Just a quick recap. How likely they are to engage is more important than whether or not they're wealthy. Number two, can you and do you have the trust with the database team, the prospect management team? Number three, are you willing to try new things to begin relationships, to think about how that, and we'll get more into that detail, but are you willing to push the envelope and be a little uncomfortable? Number four, do you have the right kind of relationships with the people who are the referral agents? And finally, are you willing to bless and release so you have room in your portfolio to do the previous four things that get you to better opportunities? There is no question that this year, whatever this year is for you in terms of your goals, is most important. I'm not taking away from that. But our turnover rate at 17, 18, 19 months for gift officers, intermediate, major gift, planned gift, principal gift, I don't care, is so short we don't ever develop the relationships we need with our donors. And part of the reason is we don't have pipelines. And we start looking down the road and going, yeah, it doesn't look very good. I got to get out of here, which gets us back to answering these 5 questions. If you want to know how to create longevity in your job, there's not a family, your family's not moving to another part of the country or whatever, you're scared about your performance, start with pipeline. And what you'll realize is if you control pipeline and you have the answers to one of these or all of these 5 questions, you'll be there longer and you'll be more successful. I promise you. Challenge yourself with the pipeline questions and, probably more important, the right answers. Next time, we'll delve into qualification and the big questions there. Don't forget to visit the website, hallettphilanthropy.com, to check out the blogs, 2 or 3 posts per week. You can get an RSS feed right to you, write about 500, 400 words per blog, take about 90 seconds to read, give you something to think about, maybe challenge the status quo. Also, don't forget, if you want to reach out to me, it's podcast@hallettphilanthropy.com. And I don't really ever like to ask, but I probably should do it more often. If you have a comment, whether it's on Apple or Spotify, YouTube, wherever, leave a comment. Rate this opportunity, this show, to help me be better at what I'm trying to give to you. Don't forget that what you do is critically important. You are a conduit. You are a connector. If you're a major gift officer, if you're a leader, you're executing on the mission, you're leading that mission. If you're in the database team or special event, whatever it is you do, you play a really big role for nonprofits. And we need these nonprofits. There's more and more people that need this kind of opportunity, service, outreach, however you want to put it. Because what philanthropy, love of mankind, love of humankind, is all about is filling the holes somewhere between government and private enterprise. Nonprofits come in and they fill that gap where it's not economically plausible to do this, and the government can't quite get to it, and maybe through partnership as well. Philanthropy is about making a difference for people and things in a community that are important. I hope you know that you are as well, because you're making a difference for your nonprofit and for the people and the things in your community that nonprofit serves. Pretty cool thing to think about. I hope you believe that it's a difference maker. Don't forget, some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. You are someone, be someone, and can be someone who makes things happen for a lot of other people who are wondering what happened. I'll look forward to seeing you on part 2 of 5 on the great questions that are holding us back in relationships, as we'll delve into qualifications next time, right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. Don't forget, make it a great day.